Tashide Lake and welcome to Tibet this week, where we bring you weekly news edition on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's have a look at today's headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama confers teachings for Southeast Asian Buddhists. 13 United Nations experts call on China to halt violations in Derge, Tibet. Penpa community and Tibetans celebrate curtain-raiser 90th birthday of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in presence of CM Shri Pema Khandu. 8th session of Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile begins. Sikyong Penpa Tsering attends 40th re-establishment anniversary of Tibetan Women's Association in Exile. Sikyong Penpa Tsering highlights Tibet's global relevance at Symbiosis International Deemed University in Pune. Central Tibetan Administration expresses concern over China's expansion of colonial boarding schools in eastern Tibet. Australian members of Parliament tables a motion on Tibet. Tibet Policy Institute holds international symposium on finding common ground. Tibetans protest against deteriorating human rights situation in Tibet as the 57th UNHRC session commences. On Thursday this week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama greeted a large group of devotees who were present at the main temple to attend his general teaching at the request of a group of followers from South Asian countries. In his teaching, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said the Nalanda tradition examined the mind and emotions and established what disturbs our peace of mind. It developed techniques to counter the destructive emotions. Furthermore, His Holiness said the purpose of the Buddha's teaching is to reduce negative states of mind. It's not about faith but bringing about change. Around 5,000 people attended the Thursday morning teaching by His Holiness, in which 700 were from Southeast Asian countries of Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Bangladesh and Laos. 13 United States Special Procedure Mandate holders have issued a communication letter to the Chinese government raising extreme concerns against the widespread violations and crackdown against Tibetans expressing opposition to the Kamtok hydroelectric power plant in Derge County, Tibet. The joint communication signed by 13 United Nations independent experts was issued on 8 July 2024 and was made public on 6 September. A similar joint communication has also been issued to the Hodon Jincha River Upstream Hydropower Development Company Limited, a subsidiary of the state-owned enterprise China Hodon Corporation Limited, which is involved in the construction of the dam. The United Nations independent experts raised extreme concerns about the environmental damage. They underscored its dire and irreversible environmental and climate impacts that the dams could cause in the Tibetan Plateau to China and region, and have called for an independent, adequate and comprehensive environmental and human rights impact assessment before any construction and development of the project, including assessing other potential alternatives for the energy needs. Tilechugi, representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Central Tibetan Administration for Central and Eastern Europe, has welcomed the joint communication of the special rapporteurs and thanked them for their detailed communication of concerns. On 7 September, Monpa people, the largest Buddhist population in the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, offered His Holiness the Dalai Lama with long life prayer ceremony at the main temple in Dharamshala. The long life prayer ceremony saw the attendance of Arunachal Pradesh Chief Minister Pema Khandu and high-level delegation from his government, who earlier had an audience with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His Holiness in his address thanked the organizer and people of Mon for the Tenshuk offering and said he recalled people of Mon who came to greet and showed him deep respect by touching their hats to his feet when he left Tibet and entered India. His Holiness said he was very moved by the devotion of the people of Mon. The long life prayer ceremony saw the attendance of 1,400 Monpas and 3,500 local Tibetans and devotees. After the completion of morning Tenshuk at Solakang, the Monpa community of Arunachal Pradesh, joined by Tibetan residents and followers of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, gathered to celebrate the confluence of three auspicious occasions. The 65th anniversary of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's first Dharma teaching to the people of Monyul since His Holiness the Dalai Lama's exile to India, the 341st birth anniversary of Gelwa Tsering Gyatso, the 6th Dalai Lama, who was born in Tawang, and the 90th birthday of His Holiness the Dalai Lama as per Tibetan lunar calendar. Kyabje Yongzingling Rinpoche attended this celebration as a chief guest, along with Honorable Chief Minister of Arunachal Pradesh, Shri Pema Khandu, who was accompanied by MP Shri Tabir Gao, the co-convener of All-Party Indian Parliamentary Forum for Tibet, Shri Pasang Doji Sona, the Education Minister of Arunachal Pradesh government, and MLAs from Arunachal Pradesh. Expressing his admiration for Chief Minister Shri Pema Khandu's leadership and dedication, Sikyong Penpa Tsering extended heartfelt thanks for the Chief Minister's unwavering devotion to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, his strong connection with the Tibetan people, and his constant remarks on border issues that support Tibet's historical status. Honorable Chief Minister Shri Pema Khandu, in his keynote address, acknowledged the special significance of the day, and he conveyed his appreciation to the Central Tibetan Administration for the warm hospitality, noting his visits to the Tibetan Parliament, Tibetan Museum, and Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts, which highlighted Tibet's rich cultural heritage. Also speaking at the grand celebration, the Speaker of Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile, Khenpo Sonam Tempel, highlighted the deep bond between the people of Tibet and Arunachal Pradesh, rooted in shared religion and culture. He also extended his gratitude to Shri Pema Khandu for his unwavering support of the Tibetan cause. On Wednesday this week, the 8th General Session of the 17th Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile, scheduled from 11 to 19 September, commenced with the announcement of session commencement by the Speaker. In his session commencement address, the Speaker highlighted several significant events of the past months on His Holiness the Dalai Lama's health update and growing international support for Tibet. The Speaker also briefed the House on the agenda of the 8th session of the 17th Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile and concluded by underscoring that resolving the Sino-Tibetan conflict remains a primary responsibility as outlined in the Charter of Tibetans in Exile. On Tuesday this week, the Tibetan Women's Association commemorated its 40th anniversary of re-establishment in exile at the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts. During the celebration, the president of TWA, Tsering delivered opening remarks followed by an address from Kasu Rinchen Khandu, the association's founding member and its current advisor. Sikyong Penpa Tsering, who attended as the event's chief guest, in his address acknowledged TWA's perseverance through challenges and lauded their hard work over the years. Sikyong further emphasized the imperativeness of including more women in association to enhance the representation of Tibetan women. Regarding the Tibetan freedom struggle, Sikyong highlighted the crucial importance of unity in sustaining its momentum while reaffirming the 60th Kashak's steadfast commitment to the middle way approach. Tibetan Women's Association was officially formed on 10th September 1984 in India by Rinchen Khandu Chogyal, a former Tibetan Youth Congress activist. However, the group claims a precursor was created in Tibet during the 1959 Tibetan Rebellion. On 5th September, Sikyong Penpa Tsering spoke at the interactive session on Why Tibet Matters held in Ishania Auditorium, Symbiosis International, deemed university in Pune, India. Sikyong Penpa Tsering of the Central Tibetan Administration delivered the keynote address during the session, which was attended by Ambassador retired Gautam Gambawale, former Indian Ambassador to Bhutan and China, faculty members from the Humanities and Social Sciences Department at Symbiosis International, Dr. Shweta Sinha Deshpande, Director of Symbiosis School for Liberal Arts, and professors and students. Sikyong in his speech outlined that understanding Tibet is crucial for India's security due to its geopolitical significance, raising awareness about the strategic and environmental importance of the region, and fostering better relations through cultural understanding of Tibetan Buddhism and Tibet's historical context. On Monday this week, according to reports received from reliable sources in the Ngaba region in Tibet, China's assimilationist education policies in Tibet and its strengthening of compulsory colonial-style boarding schools across Tibet are resulting in cultural erasure and loss of Tibetan identity. Targeted mainly at young Tibetan monks and nuns, these coercive practices pose a severe threat to the preservation of traditional Tibetan culture, religion, and way of life. Central Tibetan Administration spokesperson Tenzin Lekshe earlier spoke to Tibettv on this matter.
Recently in Amdungnawa, in Kiti Monastery and two other monasteries in Zoge zone, more than 1,700 novice monks and nuns were being forcibly discharged from the monasteries and then enrolled without consent and the wishes of the monk and their parents in the Chinese government established colonial style boarding schools. These boarding schools primarily became a kind of a hub for the Chinese government to annihilate the Tibetan culture, tradition, language, and the way of life. And they are targeting the young novice monks and nuns under the age of 18. And with this, there's a seriousness of the Chinese government's policy against the Tibetan people. And for that, we urge the immediate intervention by the international communities, especially the United Nations, for the plight of the Tibetan people. And not only that, we call upon the Chinese leaders to uphold their international legal obligations of safeguarding the rights and the freedom of the Tibetan people. Thank you.
On Monday this week, Andrew Wallace, member of the Australian House of Representatives, moved a motion on Tibet in the lower house of the Australian Parliament. The motion called out China's systematic cultural assimilation of Tibetans. It affirmed Tibetan people's rights to freely choose their economic, social, cultural, and religious policies without interference from external powers, including selecting the reincarnation of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama.
We see people of faith, democracy activists and minority groups forced into labour camps where they are beaten, tortured and enslaved. And now, while the CCP seeks to crush Tibetan identity and aspiration, we see the most basic tenets of the Tibetan Buddhist faith under fire. That includes Tibetans' right to political and religious self-determination when it comes to selecting the eventual successor of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama.
MP Susan Templeman, co-chair of Parliament Friendship of Tibet, MP Daniel Molino and MP Honourable David Gillespie seconded the motion and spoke on the pressing human rights situation in Tibet. The motion was moved during Tibet Lobby Day, which was organised by the Australia-Tibet Council in collaboration with the Tibetan communities in Australia. On Tuesday this week, the Tibetan Policy Institute hosted an international symposium on finding common ground, strategic responses in a changing global order at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. The symposium brought together a diverse audience, including Tibetan researchers, experts, historians, writers, TPI members and media professionals from the Tibetan and Indian press to discuss global challenges and formulate strategies for navigating an evolving geopolitical landscape. The panelists included Tsering, Director of Tibet Policy Institute, Yu Dahai, President of Beijing Spring Magazine and Director of Human Rights in China and the US, Sang Po, Chairman of Taiwan-Hong Kong Association, Du Keke, Chairman of Taiwan-Myanmar Citizen Association, Dr. Tsawang Doji, Research Fellow at Tibet Policy Institute, Yang Wangli, Burmese Freedom Movement, and Ying Jun, Tibet supporter, Taiwan. Teje Pamo, PhD candidate, and Dr. Kunsang Doma Pentok, a research fellow at TPI who participated in the conference, moderated the discussion. Director Tsering, in his keynote address, explained that the Institute is organizing this meeting to exchange ideas and experiences on formulating new policies to counter China amid shifting international politics. The Institute aims to collaborate with like-minded groups to confront China, focusing on finding common ground and mutual support between Tibetans and Hong Kong residents. On Monday this week, on the first day of the 57th UN Human Rights Council session, the Tibetan community of Switzerland and Liechtenstein organized a protest in front of the United Nations building against the deteriorating human rights situation in Tibet under the Chinese government's rule. United Nations Advocacy Officer Pinzo Topke from the Tibet Bureau, Geneva, addressed the gathering on current human rights situation in Tibet, and he specifically mentioned that 13 United Nations special rapporteurs who took a significant step by sending a letter to both the United Nations and Hodon Jinsha River Upstream Hydropower Development Company Limited showed deep concern of Kamtok hydroelectric power plant building in Tibetan area. The UNHRC holds regular sessions 3 times a year, and this year the 57th session is scheduled to hold from 9 September to 11 October. That is all the news for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. Thank you so much for watching.